Here's the thing. Paradoxes exist in all areas of life. There are always going to be paradoxes present where you have a number of different contradictory beliefs or things happening in any given situation. Now, when I think about my city of London, I can tell you it's a city that is full of paradoxes. Although London is idolised by many an Italian person, in fact, people question my sanity when I said that I moved to Italy 7 years ago from London, I will tell you that yes, on the one hand, it can offer you fantastic opportunities, particularly if you want to start a business. The amount of support that is available for people who want to start a business is amazing. Local initiatives, government initiatives, there's just so much encouragement given to you in London if you want to become an entrepreneur, for example. And yes, it is a city where things do generally run efficiently. Not all the time, it's not perfect, but certainly better than here in the south of Italy. However, the paradox is it's an extremely expensive city to live in. You literally have to pay an arm and a leg for everything. And it's really hard to maintain a decent quality of life, even if your salary is higher there, because everything is relative. Not to mention the fact that London in recent years has been dubbed lawless London due to soaring levels of crime. So you can see, on the one hand, London is a beautiful, incredible city, yet on the other hand, it's plagued with problems. And this is the thing about paradoxes. They exist even here in Italy. And over the last 7 years, I have observed a number of different paradoxes in different areas of life here in Italy that I'm going to talk about in today's video, because I consider myself to be an observer. In a room full of people, I am not the loudest person. I am usually the quietest person because I read rooms, I read situations, I read people. And I honestly think this is one of the smartest things that you can do, because if you are the person dominating a room and trying to keep everybody's attention, you are not aware of really what is going on around you. And I actually think, over the course of 7 years, I've observed so much, and it has helped me to gain a deeper understanding of what life is really like here and the many complicated factors and paradoxes that exist. So let's talk about the first paradox that I have really come to understand in the course of 7 years here in Italy, and it is the education paradox. Now, here in Italy, there is enormous importance placed on having a good educational background. People associate degrees with better opportunities and bigger career prospects. However, there is a problem with this, because you will find that people stay in university for a lot longer than in other countries. It's normal that you can find people here in university in their late 20s, even into their 30s. I've had students who have been in their 30s, they're still at university, and they haven't had any kind of work experience up until that point. So depending on what you're studying for, people do spend longer in university education here in Italy compared to elsewhere. However, there is a problem with that, because when you do eventually leave university with your stacks of degrees behind you, then comes the issue of actually finding a job. And this is where so many young people run into difficulties, because a degree on its own isn't a point of differentiation. You find that every Tom, Dick and Harry has a degree here in Italy. It's not considered enough. You will find that people will want that dreaded thing, experience, that so many people don't have, and which is so difficult to obtain if nobody's willing to give you a chance. Now, I will say that, a lot of people don't work whilst they are at university. Usually their family financially supports them so that they can focus solely on their studies. And while on the one hand, that's a wonderful, wonderful thing, on the other hand, it almost robs that person of the opportunity to build some life skills and potentially some experience that could help them in the future. Now, it's not to say that everybody is in this situation. Some people do hold down jobs whilst they're studying, but it's just not really a common thing. A lot of people who are at university are financially supported by their families until they finish. So you run into this problem here. And some people will do an internship here in Italy to be able to plug that gap between the experience they need and what they don't have. Now, what I will say about internships here in Italy, I actually think they're borderline exploitation, depending on the company, depending on the situation. Now, I'm not just surmising when I say this. I've had many students over the course of 7 years who have been a part of some kind of an internship, and I understand firsthand just how challenging they can be. First of all, a lot of these internships are unpaid. So, you will go through this kind of process of gaining skills and doing work as if you were a paid employee, except you're not receiving a salary. If you are paid and you're fortunate enough to be in that position, unfortunately, the pay is often so low that you're not really able to stand on your own 2 feet and build a life based on the money that you would earn from your internship alone. Not to mention the fact that some employers take advantage of these internships. And although there are supposed to be regulations in place to protect workers from this kind of situation, you will find that some employers expect trainees and people on an internship to do the kind of level of work that a paid employee would do, except they are not a paid employee. So internships here in Italy are not really an amazing thing, in my opinion. And some people feel that they are exploited doing them because there isn't always a guarantee of a job at the end of it. Sometimes it is the fact that you are just gaining that experience, often without any kind of monetary recognition. Now, aside from internships, you might find that when you leave university, your particular profession requires you to take what is known as a concorso here in Italy. A concorso is like a public competition, a contest. But again, there are problems with this because concorsos, in my opinion, are the biggest waste of time ever. Like, I literally do not know why they exist, because what normally happens with these concorsos is that the public competition is opened up and they are flooded with applications, usually for like 6 or 7 or just a handful of positions. So the odds are already incredibly low of you really being able to secure a job on the back of it. But let's talk about the concorso, because again, I've had students over the past 7 years who I have prepared for their concorso, and I can honestly tell you, it makes absolutely zero sense. First of all, a lot of concorsos will expect students to have a B2 level of English. Let me tell you, unless that student has done private lessons, it's very, very difficult for somebody to be blessed with a B2 level of English in Italy, because if I had €1 for every single student I have had over the past 7 years who has told me that they don't have a good level of English because they never had a good experience at school and because they never got on with their English teacher, or their English teacher didn't know what they were doing, whatever it may be, I wouldn't need to work again. It's really a huge problem in this country. There's Tina, sorry. So I will say to you that concorsos for me make no sense when they expect people to have this level of English, which isn't really attainable unless the person has actually kind of done private lessons. Secondly, I will say that a lot of the questions that they are asked in these concorsos are completely unrelated to the job, to the profession, to what they have to do. And sometimes it becomes more like a trivia quiz than it actually becomes about testing ability of the person to do that job. It's really quite incredible. And I've had many students struggle to prepare for these exams because they don't know what to expect. They can only go on the back of what other people who have taken similar exams have told them, or on what they've been able to find on the internet. So it's challenging, absolutely. But you see, your performance in that concorso isn't the only thing that you have to think about. Everything here is based on credits. So you gain credits. 1 minute, I have to move this camera because Tina has decided to position herself right underneath my camera to play. So everything here in Italy is based on credits. So you gain credits through experience, through education, etc., etc. And so somebody who has potentially more credits than you could perform worse than you in the concorso, but do better than you because of the credits they've already accumulated. So none of this makes any sense. And I actually think that these concursos put so many people off because they know how difficult it is to actually wind up with a job at the end of it. And what you find is usually students who have no idea what they want to do, or they're put off by the concurso, they slip back into the education trap and they study for a different qualification in the hopes that that's going to be the golden ticket to their future career. It's so complicated, and this is one aspect of life here that I've never been able to wrap my head around, for all of the different nuances and contradictory factors that exist within this area. But also, you have people who do jobs here, taking it back to English, when they're not really ready to do it themselves. And what I'm talking about here are Italian teachers who want to teach English, yet they do not have a good grasp of the language themselves. And they too are studying the language at the same time that they are teaching their students. I'm learning Italian. I've been learning Italian for 7 years. In no way, shape or form do I think that I could ever teach Italian to a foreigner. I couldn't do it because I'm not confident enough in the language myself to be able to help you. Yes, I could relate to what you're going through and, I have empathy in that sense, absolutely. But to teach you the nuances of a language when I'm still studying it myself makes no sense. Yet, over the course of 7 years, I have had many students who are teachers teaching other students, yet they do not have the necessary level of English themselves. It's this. This is the complicated, weird and wonderful world of education here in Italy. And it's something that I think really holds this country back sometimes because, so much focus is placed on education, yet there isn't enough support given to people who might want to take a different path. For example, if you don't have a degree in Italy, people look down on you like you're under their shoe. Yet actually those people without degrees are often some of the most talented individuals you can find. You've only got to look outside of Italy to recognise how many successful entrepreneurs never went to university or dropped out of university before they finished. Like, a degree is really not everything. And I wish that so many people would realise that here. And I wish this country would support alternative forms of kind of career progression rather than always being so heavily focused on exams, bureaucracy, concursos, things that just keep this country tied in knots. And that has been the biggest observation that I've made around the field of education, because it's just something that I think on the one hand is so important. Like, I think you never stop learning. And as I've said in other videos, I'm a big believer in the University of Life. I honestly think it's the best form of education you could ever have. But on the other hand, I recognize that, it's good to have an academic background, absolutely, but it shouldn't be your be all and end all focus. You need to have a well-rounded education, and that also comes from having life skills. And it also comes from having the support to kind of progress those skills in different ways. So let's talk about the second aspect, which is the work paradox. Now, there is this mentality, especially here in South Italy, that working environments are like family units until they're not. I have struggled with this concept the entire time that I've lived here, and I don't think I'll ever get used to it, because so many people buy into this belief that even if they are not blood relatives of an organisation, they are part of a family. But so many successful people will tell you that as part of an organisation, it is not a family you're building, it is a community at best. And within a community, there is respect, there is support, there is encouragement. You have each other's back, you're working towards a common goal. Like, that is a community. A family, in a way, implies no boundaries, no limits, and usually a lot more problems. And it's this, I think I'm a bit of an ice queen when it comes to the working culture here in Italy. I have never, ever allowed myself to be me in a work context. This makes me sound like Jekyll and Hyde. I don't mean it like this, but I'm a lot more closed in work situations than I am around friends, around family, because I recognise that my boss is not my best friend. My boss is my boss. My boss pays my wages, but could easily tell me one day, "Goodbye, Claire." So I can't be this pally individual with somebody who I know has that authority. I have that level of respect for my boss to have that sense of distance, because I think if you're kissing your boss on the cheek, if you're like, ciao, ciao, you have this kind of rapport, I think sometimes there is little to no respect. And also, in a way, I think as well, you forget that we are all just numbers. We are all easily replaceable. Tomorrow, if you decided to go, there'd be somebody else in your shoes a week or so later, depending on what your position is. We are not that special as employees, even if we do a bloody good job. We are easily replaceable. And so I think I've always recognised this. And I have seen over the course of 7 years that people who have been this pally with senior management, kissing them on the cheek, getting involved, telling them all about their life, blah, blah, blah. I've seen how those people have come and gone from organisations, and they are no longer there to this day. So it's this, isn't it? For me, it's so much easier to have boundaries, because I can say yes to things, but I can equally say no to things without any guilt, because I have those boundaries in place. And in a way, I kind of feel that you are respected more if you do have boundaries than if you are constantly a yes person. Yes, people become doormats very quickly, and people have no respect for you in those situations. So there are many paradoxes that exist within the world of work here in Italy, but certainly this kind of family mentality is one. I think it's far better to focus on the sense of community within an organization, and also to always have that level of respect for your boss, because I think, when you have that level of respect, it's usually mutual. And, I feel that you create a healthier working environment as a result. But I would also say that there are many other aspects of the working world where paradoxes exist. They exist especially when it comes to communication. So on the one hand, communication is vital within any organization, but on the other hand, here in Italy, it's not always at its best within a company environment. And, this might mean that staff don't get told about things, or people don't communicate messages effectively between teams. It can show up in many different ways, but I've had many students tell me that they have a lot of problems communicating to colleagues, communicating to different departments within their company here in Italy. Communication is difficult. Even like if you are an outsider and you need to communicate to a government office, or you need to contact someone here, it's very normal to wait weeks for a response to any kind of email. Like, communication is something that is vital, and it can make or break an organization. Yet here, especially in the South, communication takes on a very loose form. And I think sometimes I cannot understand how that paradox can exist, because it's so incredibly important, yet it doesn't always exist. And sometimes I struggle with that concept, because I'm a very communicative person. I am very open. I like to talk about things. I like to communicate how I feel, or to communicate solutions to problems, because I think there's no point banning on about the problem, give the solution. But it doesn't always work like that here in Italy. And so you have to kind of get used to that aspect as well. And also, I would say that this is through my own personal experience. I have worked for some crazy companies here in Italy where, on the one hand, I'm supposed to have this protection, these regulations that look after you as an employee. Yet on the other hand, I've had dodgy contracts, strange payment methods. It's actually been wild, the experiences I've had. And I can honestly say that where I work now is one of the best places I've worked at to date. Trust me, let me tell you, that's saying something. So it is like this. The world of work is incredibly wild and contains within it so many different paradoxes. You think that you are going to have one experience, but it ends up being completely different. You think you have the support of legislation and laws, and it turns out that they're just in writing, they're not actually kind of practiced. It's this. And life in Italy is full of paradoxes. I've spoken today about two major ones, work and education, but there are many other aspects of life here that have full of contradictory elements. And it is life in general, but it is something that you must get used to if you plan to live in this country, because things here don't make sense for this very reason sometimes, because all these contradictions kind of exist. And so I hope this video has given you a bit of a deeper insight into just two paradoxes that exist here. There are more, so I think probably I will do a follow-up video to this in the future. But comment below and tell me if you can help me to wrap my head around these two paradoxes that I have spoken about in today's video, work and education. Please tell me, why are things so complicated here? Why do these things exist? Why do people have this mentality? Educate me, because I promise you I've asked so many people and I'm still as baffled as before I asked the question. So maybe you, my lovely audience, can help me instead. I will see you in the next video.